Okay, we ready? All right, we are recording. Hello, everybody. My name is Thomas W. Timbrooks, and I am running for the United States House of Representatives for Oregon's 6th Congressional District as a Republican. I am a member of the Republican Party in Oregon, so yeah, I'm going to need all the luck I can get. My whole thing is I want to make Oregon's 6th Congressional District America's greatest congressional district. And let's get George Carlin said, never underestimate the power of stupid people in large numbers. Well, my motto is never underestimate the collective potential for tyranny and hypocrisy from strategically placed, ideologically indoctrinated politicians and the activists who enable them. And of course, I keep on picking on Antifa. And in this particular episode, I want to concentrate on Antifa. I want to look into Antifa, talk about Antifa a little bit, because they do play up here in the Portland area. They do have an actual fairly significant political presence, and with the protests they do, and there's a large population of liberals up here that they're very well. I mean, last weekend they had like thousands and thousands of naked hippies laying all over the bridges and streets and in front of the, walking around in front of the ICE facility and everything. I mean, you got to figure if only 10% of the hippies come out to get naked and lay in the street, and there's thousands of them doing that, there's probably a million of them sitting at home watching. They're all worried about, well, I mean, I don't want to be naked in public. I'd much prefer to wear my, hippie outfit or something. Whatever hippies do. I'm not sure what hippies do, but anyway. I want to get into the whole thing with Antifa and all that, but I want to start out with some other stuff. So here we go. Make Oregon's 6th Congressional District America's greatest congressional district. That's my motto. But today's talk is going to be about, we're going to start off with critical thinking. Okay, critical thinking. Very important concept, critical thinking. See, critical thinking is basically where we remove the emotional side of the person. All right. Now, humans are emotional creatures that think logically. We act emotionally. Everything we do is emotional, has an emotional basis. I mean, the reason I'm running as a representative has absolutely nothing to do with logic. The logical thing for me to do would be to sit down, relax, and let somebody else take control and just complain about anything that they do wrong. That would be logical. The emotional thing would be me trying to actually do something about what I consider to be a bad situation, or a situation that can be have some things addressed with it. Okay, so humans are emotional creatures that think logically. Everything we do is emotional. All the excuses we make, all the reasoning we do is logical. All right. So critical thinking is where we take away the emotional part of our decision-making process. We start thinking, critically thinking. I walk by a car dealership and I see a new Lamborghini, and I think to myself, I want one, because Lamborghini. I mean, who doesn't want a Lamborghini, right? So walking into the Lamborghini dealership, I start thinking, I'm acting emotionally and impulsively. I want one of these things. I want one bad, yeah. And then my logical mind, steps in and says, well, if you buy a Lamborghini, you're going to be living in a Lamborghini, because, people who have to ask how much this car costs can't afford a Lamborghini. Okay, so my logical mind starts, taking over, saying, wouldn't I like a Kia Soul? It's a very nice car, Kia Soul, and I don't have to live in it. Mileage, and it's probably doesn't cost as much to upkeep like that. So critical thinking is where we let go of the emotional side and take a hold of the logical side, okay? So I want to go through right now, what is critical thinking? The definition: disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, analyzing, evaluating, and synthesizing information to reach sound conclusions. And that's like I just said, you're letting go of your emotional side. And the goal is to form judgments based on evidence rather than emotion, bias, or ideology. There you go. It's a logical thinking. You let go of your emotional side. The example is a legislator reviewing conflicting economic forecasts before voting on a stimulus bill. Okay, so that is critical thinking, and this is an exercise in critical thinking. Okay, so the 5 core skills and real-world examples, okay, is interpretation. First, you understand and explain the meaning of data or events. As an example, a mayor reads rising crime stats as a symptom of economic decline, not just policing issues. And this is something that's fairly common everywhere. It is you look at the data, you look at the events, you look at what's going on, and you'll get different people interpreting different ways. Well, part of critical thinking is interpreting without an emotional bias. Okay, let's say you're a mayor of a city and you see, well, high school, the kids that graduate from high school, well, their test scores are down. What does that mean? Well, it must mean that, I don't know, the school's too difficult. No, school's the same. A logical person will come along and say, this curriculum has been the same year after year after year, decade after decade after decade. There has to be something else. Well, maybe the ethnicity has something to do with it. Well, I mean, everybody, the school is for Americans, born and raised in America, so I mean, the logical side is going to say ethnicity probably doesn't have anything to do with it. So you're going to come up with all these responses as to why it is your school scores are down. The student scores are down in school, and eventually you're going to come to some kind of logical conclusion, because any reason that comes from an emotional side is going to be removed from the reasons. You're going to come with a logical conclusion. Okay, so that's what they're talking about there with interpretation and analysis. Identify relationships among statements, causes, and data. An engineer traces a product defect back to a flawed component supplier, and that's something I used to do that back. Like I said, I'm a manufacturing engineer. I was working over at Intel and Applied Materials, Motorola, places like that. And we could say, all right, well, this component is faulty. Well, how do you know it's faulty? Well, because it's supposed to do this 1,000 times. How many times did it do it? 3 times. Okay. If it only did it like 978 times and then failed, you'd be like, well, the component's not really faulty. That's within spec limits. I mean, it's gonna, it's 1,000 times plus or minus 50 times, then you're okay. But if it's supposed to do it 1,000 times and it only did it like 3 times, you can say, well, the component's faulty. And you look at it and you say, okay, yeah, the manufacturer didn't do this, this, and this, so let's send it back to the manufacturer, like that. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that you get with analysis. Then you have evaluation. You assess the source credibility and evidence strength. And the source credibility, that's the person that is, bringing the evidence to you, and the evidence strength, which is just, you know, I mean, the source credibility. If a 6-year-old kid comes up to you and says, oh, yeah, well, it's a problem with your spark advance and your timing chain, and you're thinking, okay, I was wondering why it is my ice cream sandwich melted in the microwave. Okay, chances are pretty good that that person is not an expert and is not giving you, you know, the correct information. So if you ask a 9-year-old kid, hey, why did the ice cream sandwich melt in the refrigerator? And the kid says, you know, hey, well, I tried to heat it up. I thought it was a microwave burrito or something like that. You know, so anyways, that's the kind of thing we're talking about with, you know, assess the source credibility and evidence strength. So a journalist verifies leaked documents before publication. That's a very, very important thing to do. And, you know, sometimes, sometimes the information you get in anything it can be faulty. And, you know, information has to be timely and it has to be accurate. So, you know, the most valuable commodity in the world is information. But in order for that information to be valuable, it has to be timely, it has to be accurate. You know, it could be accurate, but if you get it too late, it's useless. If you get it in time, but it's not accurate, it's still useless. It has to be in time or on time and accurate. So, with that. So anyways, back to the, okay, inference. Okay, you draw logical conclusions from available information, and a scientist infers an exoplanet from subtle gravitational wobbles in starlight. And this is the kind of thing that, you know, I mean, the scientist will do this kind of thing, or, you know, in a political realm, I might think, well, it's entirely possible that this person wants me to support. Okay, let's say I'm a member of Congress. I'm United States Congress. I'm over there in Washington, D.C., and somebody comes up to me and says, look, I need you to support this bill. It's a very important bill. If you support this bill, I will support whatever you come up with next, right? Then I'm going to have to find out why it is this bill is so important to this person, because I don't want to support a bill that's going to provide somebody with something they shouldn't have. Okay, so for the inference, you know, if I see something that kind of makes me suspicious, makes me think, hey, there's something deeper going on, then the inference thing, I would have to follow that up. Okay, so the next one, self-regulation, is to reflect on your own biases and reasoning process. And this is something, okay, a policymaker re-examines a position after new evidence contradicts prior assumptions. Okay, and this is the kind of thing, what they'll tell you is, you know, like, never make a decision when you're hungry. Okay, never go to the grocery store while you're hungry. That kind of thing. Examine your state of mind. You know, think, you know, what, let's get back on to self-regulation. Yeah, what were your biases? What was your reasoning process? Were you thinking rationally, or were you thinking emotionally? Were you thinking logically? Were you utilizing logic, or were you being emotional? And sometimes you'll get some Congress people up there in front of the camera, and they'll be saying, oh, well, this is sick and wrong and disturbing and immoral and unjust. And okay, maybe you think it is, but in somebody else's view, this might be something that's clearing up a very big problem, and the injustice comes from something else. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about there with self-regulation. I have to regulate myself. I have to look at my own decision-making process, but I also have to look at somebody else's decision-making process. Okay, find out why it contradicts any prior assumptions. Find out why this person thinks all these things. And I'm going somewhere with this, trust me. So why critical thinking matters in population scale decisions. And when decisions affect millions, emotion can't outweigh evidence. Critical thinking ensures fairness, accuracy, and public trust. Okay, sort of like if you're part of a neighborhood association and you tell the neighborhood, you make sure that the neighborhood comes up and they mow their lawn every week, they edge and weed their lawn, and they keep their lawns looking immaculate. That's kind of an important thing. But you're part of a neighborhood association. Now, if you make that same decision, that's kind of an emotionally based decision. It's not logical, it's emotional. Because you want people driving through that neighborhood, they're going to want to look at that neighborhood. You're going to want people driving through that neighborhood to look at the houses and think these houses are beautiful, they're immaculate, the lawns are beautiful and immaculate, I want to live here. Okay? If you're making that same decision for the entire state of California, let's say, every house in California now has to have their lawn mowed every week, and they have to pull weeds out of their lawn every week. Well, now you're talking about, where are they going to get all the fuel for the lawnmowers? What kind of lawnmowers are they going to use? What kind of weeding instruments are they going to use? What happens if somebody this? What happens if, okay, it's an economy of scale thing. If you're making a decision emotionally on a small scale, that's acceptable. But if you're using an emotional train of thought and making decisions on a very, very big scale, that could be a problem. So critical thinking is extremely important when you're making decisions for millions of people. You have to maintain a logical mindset. Okay, so population level consequences, bias control. It prevents personal or political bias from distorting policy. Example of that, evaluating vaccine efficacy using multiple independent studies. Resource allocation, like I said, fuel and electricity and like that, directs finite resources to the highest impact needs. Example, prioritizing which infrastructure projects get funded first. Public confidence. The transparent reasoning builds trust in government actions. So if your government is acting logically rather than emotionally, you trust your government. So publishing clear cost-benefit analysis for new tax laws, and there you go, like that. So crisis management, it reduces panic and overreaction during emergencies, like setting wildfire evacuation zones using data models, not rumor. Ethical consistency. It aligns decisions with constitutional and moral values. And the moral values I'm talking about there, you remember, I'm always talking about how our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, guarantees rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That is the founding document. Those are the moral codes that we live by. That's the moral code we live by. The Constitution is basically, it's a process map by which we ensure all American citizens are guaranteed the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about there. Now, the mechanism of critical thinking, the mechanism in motion. First, you define the claim. Identify what's actually being asserted. Does banning plastic straws reduce ocean pollution? That's an example there. Oh, too much talky. I got to have water. And you gather the evidence. You seek verified facts and primary data. For example of this, review marine waste reports and plastic industry data sets. And you analyze alternatives. You compare explanations, solutions side by side. Example, biodegradable materials versus recycling incentives versus source reduction. Then you evaluate the risks and benefits, which is pretty standard in a project management thing. Quantify the outcomes, costs, and trade-offs. So small businesses versus environmental impact reduction. I remember this when they basically outlawed plastic straws, and they said, well, you're going to have paper straws. Okay, paper straws don't work. They fall apart almost immediately. It's ridiculous. And besides, all the stuff they put on paper straws to keep them from falling apart is actually worse for the environment than the plastic straws. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy. There was like one turtle. There was like one turtle that they found that had a plastic straw up its nose for some reason, and I mean, a turtle's nostril is like this big. And you have to wonder, how did it get us? Because, I mean, it didn't just bump into the straw and the straw went up its nose. I mean, that's just kind of crazy, because you'd have to bump into it at like 1,000 miles an hour for that straw to go up a turtle's nose. So you're wondering, how did that straw get up the turtle's nose in the first place? I don't know. But anyways, that's part of the analyzing the reasons, evaluating the risks and benefits. For small business costs versus environmental impact reduction, you're thinking, okay, one turtle had that happen. Do we shut down small businesses because one turtle had a straw up its nose? So the trade-offs. These are the costs and the trade-offs. Okay? So communicate the reasoning. You explain the logic behind the decision in plain language. Publish a brief rationale and facts for frequently asked questions for the public. Like, one question would be, how did the turtle get a straw up its nose? That's just kind of stupid and weird, okay? Then you reflect and adjust, you measure the results and iterate, you reassess 1 year later and update the policy if targets aren't met. Okay, so I guess a target would be, did we find a single turtle with a straw up its nose after all of the precautions that we took? So that would be that. So anyways, these are the mechanisms for, this is the mechanism for critical thinking, okay? In real world action, the example scenario would be raising the minimum wage will improve quality of life, okay? So define, what does quality of life mean here? You compare wage versus cost of living data across the states. You analyze, you consider automation risks and inflation effects. That means people who want more money, well, they'll just let go of a bunch of people and they'll get robots in there, right? Then you're going to evaluate, quantify the winners and losers in each income bracket, see what happens, because a company has to be profitable in order to exist. Communicate. You present the findings to both business and labor groups, and you track economic outcomes 1 year after implementation, which, gee, we used to have 30,000 employees. Now we have 15,000 employees, but those 15,000 employees are making an extra $6 an hour. So, I mean, the economic outcomes after 1 year, just, think for yourself there. So you put it all together. Okay, so critical thinking is about changing methods, not minds. Critical thinking doesn't demand that people change what they want. It helps them change how they pursue it. And this is really the important understanding of critical thinking. I'm not trying to get you to abandon your goals. I'm trying to get you to consider a different way of achieving your goals, a way of achieving your goals that is practical, economic, and based on logic. So it encourages strategy over reaction, like protesters organizing lawful, message-driven demonstrations rather than impulsive destruction, like protesters not laying in the road naked. Because what does that mean? I don't know. I think they just wanted a reason to go outside naked. I don't know. It converts emotional conviction into evidence-based persuasion. So, example, advocating environmental reform with peer-reviewed data instead of social media outrage. So, instead of Greta Thunberg getting famous for saying, "How dare you?" maybe she could be famous for coming up with some kind of alternatives. You know, I mean, maybe she could get an engineering degree and, you know, figure out solution to the problem. You know, reveal shared objectives hidden beneath conflicting methods. So both activists and police wanting safer streets, but using different means. Like the activists are laying in the streets naked because they want the streets to be safer, but the police want to arrest criminals and put them in jail. So, you know, anyways. Building bridges between opposing viewpoints. So town hall debates where opponents agree on goals after analyzing verified data together. So this is where compromise, the art of compromise, the art of the deal comes in. Okay, so trans communities, it trains communities to evaluate outcomes, not allegiances. Man, I better take another drink of water. Dry tongue. Trust me, it's water, it's not vodka. Supporting a policy because it works, not because it's partisan. Okay, and that's very important because we have religious communities that will support a plan because it agrees with their religious ideologies or we also have, you know, conservative and liberal groups, and you know, a liberal group will say, well, this solution agrees with my ideology, so let's go with this solution. Remember, whenever you are in a political office, two things to remember. The road to ruin is paved with good intentions. You may have the best of intentions. All politicians do. All politicians have the best of intentions. Everybody goes to Washington, D.C. wanting a better country. But your good intentions do not necessarily lead to great outcomes. Okay, and the next thing you want to remember is you're representing the people. You're working for the people. You're not working for an agenda. You need to do what's best for the people. You don't need to do what's best for your agenda. And if you're a liberal and you don't support the conservative agenda because it's conservative and you don't like conservatives, you're supporting your agenda rather than your people. And you support your people, not your agenda. And remember that the road to ruin is paved with good intentions. So, yeah. Anyways, critical thinking is the bridge between conviction and collaboration. It doesn't erase differences, it refines the path to a common purpose. And if both sides think critically, then we can come to a common purpose. We can remove the differences and find a path to a common purpose. So now here we go to the story of Antifa, from the origins to modern movement. And I'll bet you a lot of people didn't realize here, the origins of the anti-fascist movement from the 1920s and 30s. That's right, Antifa was around in the 1920s. The Antifa movement is over 100 years old. So how long has fascism been around? Quite some time. The anti-fascist movement began as a grassroots resistance to the rise of totalitarian regimes in Europe. It wasn't born out of chaos, but out of defense, a fight against oppression and authoritarian control. In the 1920s, Italy, anti-fascism rose in response to Benito Mussolini's fascist party and violent suppression of labor unions and political opponents. In the 1930s, Germany, the idea spread as the German Communist Party organized anti-fascist action in 1932 to oppose Hitler's growing power. Their growing vision: protect workers' rights, civil liberties, and community autonomy against state oppression. Now, no centralized leadership. Central leadership meant vulnerability. Fascist governments could dismantle resistance by arresting top organizers. Decentralization allowed local autonomy, flexibility, and resilience under authoritarian crackdowns. And this is what Antifa does now. Antifa right now is a movement where the people who are part of the movement, they don't have any central authority. There's no central Antifa person cracking the whip saying, no, that's wrong, that's right, that's good, that's bad. Every member of the Antifa movement is an independent person, an independent consultant, doing what that person believes is best for the Antifa movement. Okay, now, of course, there's problems with this, because if these people are left alone, they could start messing things up really badly. They could start doing things that just really mess things up. So, you know, and like I said in a previous thing, what I found is Antifa is actually, but you know what, let's get back to the slides here, okay? So visual identity, the iconic red and black flag logo symbolized unity between socialist and anarchist resistance groups. The same principle of leaderless resistance was later echoed by underground movements in Nazi-occupied Europe, surviving through decentralization. So that's why they are decentralized. Now, the rebirth of Antifa, late in the 20th century, to present, today's Antifa inherits the name and some principles of the original movement. Well, dang it. I lost my, today's Antifa inherits the same principles of the original movement, but exists in a very different political, social, and technological environment. I'm actually reading the slides to you as I'm watching them on a monitor in the studio here, so sorry if some things go wrong. At least now you know that I'm not like you know, AI or something like that. I'm a real human being. So it reappeared in 1980s Europe, West Germany and the UK, and 1990s and 2000s in the US, opposing neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups. So you see, this is what I'm talking about. Good intentions. Antifa had terrific intentions. They're opposing neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups. What could be better than that? You know, I mean, that's fantastic. So the similarities to the original movement: decentralized structure, still no top leadership, anti-authoritarian and anti-racist objectives, which is fantastic. Focus on community defense and protest organizations. So, you know, terrific intentions in first. Okay, so the differences from the past: it operates in open democracies, not totalitarian regimes. It uses digital networks and social media for mobilization, and tactics sometimes include property damage and direct confrontation, blurring public perception. It often lacks unified political ideology beyond opposing fascism, leading to internal inconsistencies. The public image divide. Supporters see Antifa as a moral counterforce. Critics see it as a lawless and unaccountable, which it really is. Because, I mean, Antifa was meant to, you're in republic, we're a constitutional republic. In a constitutional republic, you're allowed to protest. You're allowed to get rid of governments. And Antifa was originally meant to be against a government that is nothing like the United States government. Okay? So, that's kind of crazy that it would even feel that they would need to exist in America. So, now, with the tactics and sometimes including property damage and lax unified political ideology, but we'll get to that in a minute. Portland and Seattle protests in 2020 became emblematic. Some participants engaged in vandalism, overshadowing peaceful demonstrators, advocating against systemic injustice, which the systemic injustice, as it turns out, doesn't actually exist. And as it also turns out, a lot of these Antifa members are paid protesters. Okay, these Antifa people are paid protesters. And if you go up to these Antifa people and you say, you're Antifa, right? Okay, so you're anti-fascist. Can you define fascism? No, I don't have to answer your questions. So, sorry. I always got to keep my water with me because talkie. I think if I were going to run an Antifa cell, I would have, minimal. Everybody in the Antifa cell has to be able to define fascism. And if anybody walks up to you and says, you're Antifa, great, can you define fascism? Yes, fascism is this. It is a political system that trades your security for their political indoctrination. You will get security as long as they get if you're politically indoctrinated, they will keep you secure. So it's a trade-off. As long as you're politically indoctrinated in their ideology, or you're ideologically indoctrinated in their political philosophy, then they will protect you. But if you don't, then they won't protect you. You won't have a job, you won't have property, you won't have privacy, blah, blah, blah. So, that would be the minimum. The second thing I would say is if somebody asks you a question, you should feel obliged to engage in conversation with that person. Okay, I mean, this is why people don't trust Antifa, because Antifa's like, well, I don't have to answer your questions. Okay, and the third thing is, with the understanding of what fascism actually is, and with the ability to engage in conversation with people, you have to be able to identify certain fascist policies in government. So those would be the three things. If I were to run an Antifa organization, or an Antifa group, those would be the three things I would want. Okay, but they don't do that. So, anyways, the debate centers on whether decentralized movements can even be labeled as organizations, and this is where we're talking about the terrorist organization debate. Donald Trump wants to label Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. Well, decentralized movements can even be, whether or not decentralized movements can even be labeled as organizations, and what the label implies for civil liberties. The declaration, the Trump administration in 2020 and again in 2025 called for Antifa's designation as a domestic terrorist organization. The arguments for the label, certain protests escalated into violent riots, arson, or assaults on property. Coordination across cities using encrypted channels suggest organized intent. Federal agencies claim Antifa-linked actors promote chaos rather than reform. The arguments against the label: no centralized structure or membership, legally not an organization. Labeling domestic dissent as terrorism risks chilling free speech and protest rights. And remember, we got the First Amendment there. Most participants are independent activists, like I said. Violence often comes from small subgroups and provocateurs. The legal reality is U.S. law allows terrorism designations only for foreign entities, and applying this label domestically faces First Amendment and due process challenges. For example, courts have repeatedly thrown out broad domestic terror claims when lacking evidence of formal hierarchy or direct coordination. So, the rights and responsibilities, the constitutional balance. Freedom of assembly is a cornerstone of democracy, but it coexists with the rights of others to live safely and without fear. First Amendment guarantee the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. Protected peaceful protests, marches, and demonstrations, even if politically unpopular, like fat naked hippies. Not protected is violence, vandalism, arson, or intimidation. Interfering with others' safety, property, or rights to liberty and pursuit of happiness. I guess naked hippies, kind of that too. The legal framework. Local governments may impose time, place, and manner restrictions for safety and order. Law enforcement must balance enforcement with preservation of free expression. Like over at the ICE facility in Portland, the people in the apartment complexes surrounding that can't get any sleep, and the kids can't, there's a school really close by. The kids can't go out on the playground because of all the toxic pepper bullets and stuff, you know? The key distinction, dissent is legal, destruction is not. So example, civil rights marches in the 1960s achieved lasting reform by maintaining disciplined nonviolence, showing that strength and restraint can coexist. The path forward, applying critical thinking to Antifa. Antifa can improve its effectiveness and public image by adopting the tools of critical thinking, transforming from reactive opposition to proactive reform. Define the true objective. Is the goal justice, equality, or simply opposition to the other side? Clarity changes outcomes. Gather and verify evidence. You focus on documented injustice or verified extremism before acting. You analyze consequences. Consider whether tactics help or harm the broader cause. You evaluate alternatives. Peaceful counter-protests, community education, and digital outreach are often more persuasive. Communicate clearly. Replace slogans with reasoned statements of purpose. Reflect and adjust. You learn from outcomes. Reject actions that discredit the message. The result will be a movement that inspires confidence instead of fear, and broader coalitions built on shared objectives rather than shared anger. So, you can't fight authoritarianism with chaos. You fight it with clarity, transparency, and so forth. Okay, so that's what I'm talking. That's my thing about Antifa. So really, Antifa, it's like I said, the road to ruin is paved with good intentions. Antifa has the best of intentions, but the outcome is not great because the way they execute their policies it's not very good. It's not coordinated. It's not the result of critical thinking. So Section 3 is going to be on ICE labels and law enforcement through the lens of critical thinking. So the role of ICE. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, was created September 11th, 2001 as part of the Department of Homeland Security. Its mission to protect national security, public safety, and border integrity through immigration enforcement and investigation. So remember September 11th, that's the whole World Trade Center thing. It was founded in 2003 under the Homeland Security Act. Primary functions: enforcing federal immigration laws inside the U.S., investigating cross-border crimes, human trafficking, drug smuggling, money laundering, removing criminal non-citizens who pose threats to public safety. The key divisions are enforcement and removal operations. They locate, detain, and deport individuals with court-ordered removals, and Homeland Security investigations. It investigates internal crimes and criminal networks. The public safety role Interpol. It works with local law enforcement to dismantle smuggling rings and rescue trafficking victims. It often collaborates with the FBI, DEA, and state police to target organized crime. Examples: ICE's Operation Predator has rescued thousands of child victims of exploitation since 2003, and that they have done a lot of that. So why ICE gets labeled as fascist? ICE has become a lightning rod in America's political debate, often called fascist by critics who associate immigration enforcement with authoritarian control. Public perception issues. The media coverage of family separations and deportations of nonviolent migrants shaped a narrative of cruelty. Activists equate border enforcement with nationalism or ethnic exclusion. Historical confusion. The term fascist originally referred to totalitarian regimes like Mussolini's Italy's centralized power or suppression of opposition and state propaganda. ICE operates under civilian law with judicial oversight and congressional accountability. It's the opposite of fascism's unchecked power. So ICE is not fascist. The government is not fascist for employing ICE. The emotional substitution. Anger at immigration policy is often redirected towards the agents enforcing it, and this conflates policy disagreement with moral condemnation of lawful enforcement. Critical thinking observation is a label doesn't describe reality, it describes emotion. And to understand ICE objectively, we must evaluate what it actually does, not what opponents feel it represents. So, not feelings, but actual evidence. So for an example, comparing ICE to Gestapo or fascist police ignores key distinctions. ICE agents are bound by U.S. law, open to public review, and subject to due process constraints, which is why we get all these protesters in Portland, is because Portland's a sanctuary city, and a lot of times the cops can't enforce the law because it would violate the sanctuary city policy. So applying critical thinking to the ICE debate. Critical thinking helps citizens separate what ICE does from how it is perceived. Shifting from moral outrage to factual analysis. Define the claim, and we're going through the process here. ICE is a fascist organization. Test the claim. What evidence supports this? What evidence contradicts it? Compare to the definition of fascism. Is there one-party rule? Is dissent criminalized? Is ICE above the law? Evaluate the evidence. ICE's actions are reviewable by courts and Congress. Hallmarks of democracy, not fascism. Consider the alternatives. What happens if ICE were abolished? Who investigates human trafficking or deportation orders? You communicate the findings. Law enforcement is necessary to uphold the laws created through democratic means. An example, when ICE dismantles the human trafficking ring, it's acting against the very oppression fascism represents, protecting victims and restoring liberty. So law enforcement and public peace. The rule of law isn't an enemy of liberty. It's the condition that makes liberty possible. Law enforcement as peacekeeping. Without enforcement, laws are just suggestions. Order allows citizens to live safely, pursue happiness, and exercise their rights. The social contract here. Citizens consent to follow laws in exchange for protection of life, liberty, and property. The balance of power. Enforcement must remain accountable, public oversight, courts, media scrutiny. Accountability, not abolition, ensures justice. Critical thinking application. When enforcement seems harsh, ask, is the problem with the law or with its enforcement? Reform laws thoughtfully. Don't destroy the institutions that uphold them. The moral framework here. Compassion and law are not opposites. They are partners when guided by truth and reason. For example, ICE agents who arrest human traffickers are exercising compassion through law, protecting the weak from exploitation. So that's important. We want to protect the weak from exploitation. So we're bringing it all together here. Critical thinking reveals that ICE is not an authoritarian force, but a reflection of a lawful society's need for boundaries, security, and accountability. The objective is public safety and legal integrity. The method, federal law enforcement under constitutional limits. The misperception, equating enforcement with oppression. The reality, enforcement prevents exploitation and maintains the stability that allows freedom to flourish. There's a lesson here. Before labeling, analyze. Before judging, verify. Before condemning, consider the consequences of absence. Very important stuff there. The moral dimension of enforcement. Law enforcement is not the opposite of compassion. It is compassion expressed through structure, restraint, and protection. Evil often hides in lawlessness, and this is part of the human thing. You know, like I said, we're emotional creatures who think logically. So our emotional side, yeah, we want the kids to be in charge of the candy store. But the logical side, if we put the kids in charge of the candy store, there'll be a lot of fun for a very short time, but the business won't survive. So, you know, that's what we're talking about there. So, anyways, the role of enforcement is prevention, not punishment. Agencies like ICE act to protect innocent lives from exploitation, trafficking, and organized abuse. Compassion requires boundaries. Without secure borders and clear laws, the vulnerable suffer first. Critical thinking connection. Emotional reactions may see enforcement as cruelty, but reason reveals it as guardianship of human dignity. The moral principle here, mercy without order becomes chaos. Order without mercy becomes tyranny. True justice balances both. So if we apply critical thinking to our political system, logic will determine that a free society is not one without law enforcement. It's one where law enforcement is held to the law. This is what we call transparency. And transparency, I mean, in the House of Representatives, back 250 years ago, there was a congressional committee. Okay, Congress got together to create the Constitution. Okay? In order for the Constitution to be ratified by all of the states wanted a Bill of Rights for the people. See, we had the roadmap, sections, Articles 1 through 7, all the sections and everything. We had, everything that the government was supposed to do, but all of the representatives wanted a Bill of Rights. Okay, so they decided, okay, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution is going to be the Bill of Rights, and this is to protect the people from government. We knew what government needed to do, but we had to have restrictions on government because we saw, or they saw back then, what unrestricted government is capable of doing, and they didn't like it. So they decided, look, the people have rights. This is their Bill of Rights, and the amendments to the Constitution, like it's Article 5 of the Constitution is the amendment process, the process of how to amend the Constitution. So, anyway, so that's what we're talking about. The Constitution, like I said, is the roadmap by which the government assures all people are guaranteed life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So, obeying the Constitution, very important, and the Constitution establishes laws. We have laws that make sure everybody gets life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, not just the rich and powerful. Well, a lot of times the rich and powerful are able to convince the weak and the poor that it's in their best interest to go against their best interest. It's the power of persuasion. It's just marketing. Okay, and so, God, it's very easy to be victimized by a really good marketing campaign because that's what these people do. They get together, they say, well, the psychological, all we have to do is this, that, and the other. If we brand this and brand that, and we come up with these slogans, people will just eat it all up. Okay, Black Lives Matter, for example. Okay, I mean, who's going to say Black lives don't matter? Yeah, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, right? Well, Black Lives Matter, you know, they gathered hundreds of millions of dollars in, you know, it was a charity. People are giving them money left and right. Oh, Black Lives Matter, give me money. Okay, here's money because Black Lives Matter. The organization did absolutely nothing to help any black people. Nothing at all. Same thing with Antifa. Hey, we're Antifa, we're anti-fascist. Well, that's terrific. That's a great slogan. That's a great brand. Anti-fascist is a great brand. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to follow people around and call them pigs and tell them that they should commit suicide. Their blood looks good on the sidewalk. And you're like, that doesn't seem like something I support. Am I supporting that when I support the anti-fascist movement? So that's what I'm talking about is, you know, critical thinking is very important from the ground up. Everybody needs to exercise critical thinking. You, me, the government, everybody, okay? So the next time you see, you know, something happening, remember, humans are emotional creatures that think logically. If you want to figure out what is really going on, what the real situation is, separate your emotional mind from your logical mind and exercise the process of critical thinking. If you exercise the process of critical thinking, you'll come out with a much better answer. You'll come up with a much better solution to the problem, and the solution will stand over time. It will withstand the test of time. Okay, that's what I'm talking about today. And I really wanted to talk about Antifa and ICE because I do have a lot of respect for the anti-fascist movement because I'm very much anti-fascist. I think every American would be anti-fascist, and I think it's possible that even in a constitutional republic, there can be some policies that are reminiscent of fascism. DEI, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, for one. I mean, who doesn't want diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace? Everybody does. The problem is the government makes indoctrination in their philosophy of DEI a part of whether or not you get hired. So if a company can deny you employment because you are not voluntarily indoctrinating yourself in a government policy, then you are having your guarantee of economic security taken away from you. And that is fascism. And I would like for that to stop. I wish there was an organization around that could address the problems of fascism in government. Yeah, that would be Antifa. The only problem is Antifa doesn't do that. They run around on the streets in the middle of the night dressed in black and covering with umbrellas and calling people pigs and just causing all kinds of problems. So, see, that's a problem I have with them. And so, anyways, that's what I'm getting at. Just, I think Antifa needs to reevaluate their situation. I think the people who are stand up for Antifa need to take a different perspective. They need to look at what they're doing, how they're doing it. And ICE, I think ICE is doing a great job. I think they're doing a wonderful job. I love ICE. I think they are the heroes. They're not the villains in the situation. They really need to, we need to give them a lot of respect and a lot of our thanks because they're facing a lot of problems. The criminals that they're gathering up don't like them, and the American citizens that they're cleaning the streets up for some reason don't like them. So it's just mind-blowing. So the people who hate ICE, you also need to exercise some critical thinking. Okay, so do that and we'll all be great. So these are the 10 things that I want to do whenever I get to Congress in Washington, D.C., if that's possible. Remove $5 trillion from national debt. Propose 28th Amendment. I got a video on that. Secure America's digital infrastructure by requiring PLCs be built domestically. Tuberculosis and polio screening for all migrants as well as food workers. The 5-pillar blueprint for empowering local governments. Protecting our law enforcement through the Reasonable Operation Space Act. Requiring early measles vaccination, America Talent First Act to ensure American workers are prioritized over for American jobs. Immunotherapy for cancer research. We're doing that here in Oregon. I want to pump up the volume there. And in-person voting. So those are the 10 big ones. I have other ideas, but anyways. Oh, another thing. I support President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. I seriously thought, I mean, with all the peace that Trump has done, I mean, he is really, and this last thing in Gaza, I mean, come on, the guy deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, so Make America Great Again, MAGA. Yes, I am a MAGA Republican, but I am a Make Oregon 6th Congressional District America's greatest congressional district Republican. I am a Mosdagtka Republican. So that's the way I roll there. I want to, that's my goal, is to make Oregon 6th Congressional District America's greatest congressional district, make Oregon the greatest state in the nation. So I am Thomas W. Timbrooks, and I am running for the United States House of Representatives for Oregon's 6th Congressional District. Please vote for me. So thank you very much for listening to me, and take care of yourselves.